A room inside the Great Hall of the People, March 11, 2018. Nearly 3,000 delegates vote on a constitutional amendment. The vote takes 11 minutes. When it ends, 2 people voted no, 3 abstained. The rest raised their hands. The amendment removed 2 sentences from Article 79 of the Chinese Constitution. Those sentences said the president could serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. No debate preceded the vote. No delegate stood to speak against it. The outcome was announced as unanimous support. Xi Jinping now had no formal limit on how long he could remain in power. That vote didn't arrive suddenly. It ended something that had existed since 1982, a system designed specifically to prevent one person from holding power indefinitely. After Mao Zedong died in 1976, the Communist Party spent years trying to answer a single question: how do you stop the next Mao? Mao had ruled for decades. His decisions triggered famine, purges, and the Cultural Revolution. Millions died. The party itself nearly collapsed. When it was over, the surviving leadership agreed no one person should ever hold that much control again. Deng Xiaoping, who took power after Mao, built the solution. He created term limits. He separated the roles of party leader, military chief, and head of state. He established a retirement age for officials. He formalized collective decision-making at the top. The system wasn't democratic, it was authoritarian. But it was also predictable. Power would rotate. Leaders would retire. Successors would be chosen years in advance through internal negotiation, not personal loyalty. This mattered because predictability reduces risk. Officials knew when their superiors would leave. Rivals knew when competition would open. Foreign governments knew who would lead China 5 or 10 years ahead. The term limit itself was symbolic. The real power in China lies with the General Secretary of the Communist Party, not the presidency. But the 2 roles had been held by the same person since the 1990s. And the term limit on the presidency signaled something. Even the most powerful leader would step down. It reassured the party elite. It told them the system was bigger than any individual. That assurance began eroding the moment Xi Jinping took power in 2012. He didn't violate the rules immediately. He followed procedure. He became General Secretary. He became Chairman of the Central Military Commission. In 2013, he became president. But he also did something his predecessors had avoided. He concentrated authority. His predecessors, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, had governed through consensus. They shared power with other members of the Politburo Standing Committee. Decisions were collective, factions were balanced. The Standing Committee functioned as an oligarchy. 7 men, each controlled different policy domains. The General Secretary was first among equals, not absolute ruler. That model created inefficiency. Decisions took time. Compromises were necessary, but it also created stability. No single official could purge rivals without consensus. No faction could dominate completely. Xi rejected that model. Within his first term, he launched an anti-corruption campaign that removed hundreds of high-ranking officials. Some were genuinely corrupt. Others were rivals or potential obstacles. The campaign didn't just punish individuals, it sent a message. Loyalty to Xi was now the dominant currency in Chinese politics. The campaign targeted both factions that had competed for power during the previous 2 decades. Officials tied to former General Secretary Jiang Zemin. Officials loyal to the Communist Youth League faction. Both groups lost senior members. By 2017, more than 1.5 million officials had been disciplined. Over 400,000 were prosecuted. Several dozen held positions at the vice ministerial level or higher. This wasn't random enforcement. The targets followed a pattern. Officials who had independent power bases, those with personal networks that didn't include Xi, those who might credibly challenge him. The prosecutions were public. Confessions were broadcast. The imagery was deliberate. Former leaders, shown in humble clothing, stripped of status, admitting guilt. The message reached every official in the system: your position is conditional. Your network won't protect you. Only alignment with Xi offers security. He also created new party organs that reported directly to him, small leading groups on everything from economic reform to internet security. These groups bypassed traditional ministries and party committees. They centralized decision-making around Xi personally. He became the public face of Chinese power in a way no leader had been since Mao. State media stopped referring to the collective leadership. They referred to the core, Xi himself. By 2017, Xi's name was added to the party constitution while he was still in office, an honor previously reserved for leaders after death. The ideology was called Xi Jinping Thought on Socialism with Chinese Characteristics for a New Era. The full name mattered. It wasn't just Xi Jinping thought. It was an entire framework. It claimed equal status with Mao Zedong thought and Deng Xiaoping theory. That same year, the party Congress ended without naming a clear successor. Tradition dictated that a younger official would be elevated to the Politburo's Standing Committee to signal the next generation of leadership. Specifically, someone born in the 1960s, young enough to serve 2 full terms after Xi's expected retirement in 2022. No one fitting that profile was chosen. The Standing Committee remained composed entirely of men in their 60s. All would hit retirement age around the same time Xi would. The absence was noted quietly. Foreign analysts wrote careful assessments. Inside China, officials read the signal. If Xi had no successor, what did that mean for 2022, the year he was expected to step down? Some assumed Xi would retire as party leader but remain president. Others thought he might stay on as a senior advisor, wielding informal influence like Deng had. The possibility that he would simply ignore the term limit was discussed, but many considered it unlikely. The limit had been in place for 36 years. It was tied to Deng's legacy. Removing it would mean repudiating the entire Post-Mao Settlement. The answer came in February 2018. The party's Central Committee proposed the constitutional amendment. State media announced it on February 25th. The tone was calm, procedural. The language emphasized continuity and stability. The proposal wasn't framed as a power grab. It was framed as alignment. The presidency, the official explanation went, should match the party and military positions, which had no term limits. Having different rules created inconsistency. Removing the presidential term limit would unify the leadership structure. This logic was technically accurate. The General Secretary role had no term limit written into party rules. It operated on informal norms. Leaders served 2 terms, then retired. But norms are fragile. They depend on collective agreement. Once one leader breaks them, the precedent shifts. Foreign observers reacted immediately. The move was described as a power grab, a return to dictatorship, the end of collective rule. Inside China, the reaction was more complex. Censors blocked the term "I disagree" on social media. They banned the letter N, which in mathematics represents an indefinite number. They removed references to Winnie the Pooh, a cartoon character people had used to mock Xi. They blocked the phrase "migration to Canada," but there were no protests. No public opposition, no faction within the party broke ranks. Some intellectuals posted coded criticism. A professor at Tsinghua University circulated a letter calling the amendment a historic mistake. The letter was removed within hours. The professor disappeared from public view. A few brave voices spoke carefully. A legal scholar suggested the amendment undermined constitutional governance. He was ignored, then sidelined. but the vast majority remained silent. This wasn't because everyone agreed, it was because disagreement had already become dangerous. The anti-corruption campaign had removed the officials most likely to resist. The propaganda apparatus had spent years elevating Xi's image. The security services had expanded surveillance and tightened control over civil society. By the time the amendment reached the National People's Congress, the outcome was certain. The Congress itself is not a legislative body in the Western sense. It doesn't debate policy, it doesn't represent public opinion, it ratifies decisions already made by the Communist Party leadership. Delegates are chosen through a controlled process. Some represent provinces, others represent the military, state-owned enterprises, or ethnic minorities. All are vetted by the party. Their role is symbolic. They provide a constitutional veneer to decisions made behind closed doors. Still, the vote mattered. It demonstrated control. It showed the party elite had accepted, or at least wouldn't challenge, Xi's indefinite rule. The session opened on March 5th. The constitutional amendment was one of several items on the agenda. It was presented as routine. Wang Chen, a senior party official, explained the rationale. He emphasized the need for unified leadership. He noted that removing the term limit didn't mean Xi would serve forever, only that the decision would be left to the party, not mandated by law. This distinction was important. It preserved the illusion of institutional control. The party, the argument went, could still decide when Xi should retire. The amendment simply removed an arbitrary constraint. Of course, the party was now shaped around Xi. Its mechanisms for collective decision-making had been weakened. The officials who might have pushed for his retirement had been purged or sidelined. The vote took place on March 11th. Delegates pressed buttons on electronic voting devices. Red lights appeared on a display board. Yes, votes. A few yellow lights, abstentions. 2 green lights, no votes. The final tally, 2,958 in favor, 2 against, 3 abstentions. The 2 no votes were never explained. The delegates who cast them were not identified. Whether they acted out of principle, miscalculation, or private protest remains unknown. Their votes changed nothing. But they were recorded. The amendment passed. Applause followed. Xi sat on the podium expressionless. What changed after the vote? The formal answer, nothing immediate. Xi remained General Secretary. He remained President. The government continued to function. The structural answer, everything. Removing the term limit didn't just extend Xi's tenure. It eliminated the predictability that had stabilized the system for decades. Officials no longer knew when Xi would leave. That uncertainty changed behavior. Loyalty became more valuable than competence. Officials stopped proposing ideas that might displease the leadership. Risk aversion spread through the bureaucracy. Provincial leaders who once had discretion to experiment with policy now waited for signals from Beijing. Innovation slowed. Implementation of central directives became mechanical. Factions within the party lost leverage. In a system with term limits, rival groups could wait. They could position successors, they could negotiate future power. Without limits, there was no clear endpoint to wait for. The Communist Youth League faction, which had produced leaders like Hu Jintao, saw its influence collapse. Without a predictable succession timeline, cultivating younger leaders became pointless. The princelings, children of revolutionary elders, including Xi himself, consolidated dominance. But even within that group, loyalty to Xi personally mattered more than family lineage. Foreign governments adjusted their strategies. If Xi would be China's leader for the foreseeable future, then understanding his priorities became more important than understanding the party as a whole. Diplomats stopped cultivating relationships with rising officials. they focused on Xi's inner circle. Trade negotiations, security agreements, and climate commitments were increasingly framed around Xi's personal goals. This created brittleness. If Xi changed his mind, or if Xi was eventually removed, the relationships built around him would collapse. The decision also reshaped China's relationship with its own past. Deng's reforms had been built on a rejection of Mao's cult of personality. The term limits were part of that rejection. By removing them, Xi signaled that Mao's model of governance, centralized, personal, indefinite, was no longer taboo. State media began comparing Xi to Mao more openly. Propaganda emphasized his vision, his leadership, his indispensability. This didn't happen by accident. It required active reinforcement. Schools revised textbooks to emphasize Xi's ideology. Entire chapters were dedicated to Xi Jinping thought. Teachers were required to pass exams on the material. Officials at every level of government were required to study Xi's speeches in regular sessions. Apps were developed to track participation. Points were awarded for reading articles, watching videos, and answering quizzes. Loyalty oaths became more common. Military officers pledged personal loyalty to Xi, not just to the party or the Constitution. Dissent became more costly. Academics who questioned party policy lost positions. Lawyers who defended activists were disbarred. Journalists who reported sensitive stories were detained. The term limit had served as a circuit breaker. It forced leadership transitions. It created moments when the system had to test itself, when factions had to negotiate, when power had to be redistributed. Without that circuit breaker, power accumulates. It doesn't disperse. And accumulated power changes the person holding it. Leaders with fixed terms make different calculations. They know their time is limited. They balance short-term goals with long-term legacy. They avoid decisions that might destabilize the system they'll soon leave behind. Leaders without term limits think differently. They can afford to take risks. They can purge enemies without worrying about retaliation after retirement. They can reshape institutions to reflect their personal vision. This affects policy. After 2018, China's foreign policy became more assertive. The Belt and Road Initiative expanded. Military activity in the South China Sea increased. Rhetoric toward Taiwan hardened. These shifts weren't solely because of the term limit removal, but the removal made them easier. Xi no longer had to compromise with officials who favored caution. He no longer had to worry about successors undoing his initiatives. Domestically, control tightened. Surveillance expanded. Xinjiang's camps grew. Hong Kong's autonomy eroded. Again, these policies had roots before 2018. But without term limits, there was no internal check. No faction could argue that the policies risked instability beyond Xi's tenure. The concentration of power also affected economic policy. China's rapid growth from the 1980s through the 2010s had relied on decentralization. Provincial leaders competed to attract investment. Entrepreneurs operated in gray zones where regulation was unclear. Experimentation was tolerated. Under Xi, control returned to the center. The state reasserted dominance over private companies. Tech firms were restructured. Billionaires were disciplined. The message was clear. Economic power must not challenge political power. This reduced dynamism. Growth slowed. But stability, defined as party control, was prioritized. Xi's rule didn't become authoritarian in 2018. China was already authoritarian. But the removal of term limits changed the trajectory. It made the system more dependent on one person's judgment. It reduced the mechanisms for course correction. It made succession, whenever it happens, more uncertain and potentially more violent. This matters because China isn't a minor state. It's the world's second-largest economy. It's a nuclear power. It's a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Decisions made in Beijing affect global trade, regional security, climate policy, and technological development. A leadership system that rotates power allows for policy shifts. New leaders can adjust course without rejecting their predecessors entirely. Mistakes can be corrected. A system built around one individual makes those shifts harder. If Xi remains in power for another decade or two, China's trajectory becomes inseparable from his personal priorities. That introduces risk. Not because Xi is uniquely dangerous, but because any system that concentrates power in one person for an indefinite period becomes brittle. It can't easily adapt. It can't correct mistakes without admitting the leader was wrong. It can't prepare successors without threatening the current leader. History offers patterns. Stalin ruled the Soviet Union until his death. His successors spent years undoing his cult of personality and purging his allies. The process destabilized the system. Mao died without a clear succession plan. The resulting power struggle produced the Cultural Revolution's final spasms and nearly destroyed the Communist Party. Deng learned from both. He built a system that prevented one-man rule. That system survived his death and functioned for 3 decades. Xi dismantled it, not through a coup, not through violence, through legal procedure and institutional capture. The amendment passed a vote. It followed the Constitution's own rules for modification. It was presented as routine governance, but routineness can mask rupture. The vote in the Great Hall took 11 minutes. 2 delegates voted no. Their names were not recorded. Their reasons were not explained. They may have pressed the wrong button. They may have acted deliberately. No one knows. 3 delegates abstained. Perhaps they were absent. Perhaps they hesitated. The record doesn't say. The rest voted yes. Not because they all believed in Xi's indefinite rule, but because voting no carried consequences they weren't willing to face. That calculation, choosing silence over risk, is how systems change. Not through dramatic confrontation, through 1,000 small surrenders. The amendment passed. The session ended. The delegates went home. The system that Deng Xiaoping built to prevent another Mao was quietly dismantled. What replaced it wasn't chaos. It was order, centralized, personal, and permanent. Until it isn't.